up, everybody? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. We are back. Today we got Cara Santa Maria. I'm a fan of her podcast. I actually found out about her work on the Young Turks, then saw her on Joe Rogan's podcast, and she's done a bunch of stuff. She shows up on she's done writing for Huffington Post. She's actually on Adam Scorgi, my last guest's new movie, The Culture High. She's been on tons of different podcasts, shows up on different shows, just kind of supporting science and kind of waving that science flag. And I guess like we're talking about just before we start recording, just kind of it's cool that she's making it I guess fashionable, I guess, in a way, you know, and so I think it's cool because even somebody like me who's not that much into science, you make it interesting, and a lot of weird topics that I wouldn't find intriguing on my own, you know, I end up hearing a 1 hour conversation about it on your podcast, and I'm like, I can't believe I just sat through that, you know, but thanks, Cara. I really appreciate you taking your time to be with me.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, one thing I love about your podcast, and I think you in general, is how honest you are. It seems like Rogan and you and a lot of people who have successful podcasts and people really I think that's one of the things that appeal to us is really your honesty, because you talk about things like you've talked about depression quite a bit on different shows and stuff like that, and that's something I've dealt with growing up quite a bit, and it was cool because anytime I do music or whatever, I always it helped me kind of get my emotions on paper, and then it kind of helped me kind of, I guess, face it, and then I think it made it easier for me to talk to people about it because I was always tapping into that dark, I guess those dark moments or whatnot. So it made it kind of easier because I was constantly expressing it on paper, and then I think it translated into person. And it's amazing when you talk to people about it, and then you find out holy shit, I'm also on antidepressants, or I also dealt with it. And it's it's kind of disarming once you find out other people dealt with it, because I think that some people are embarrassed a little bit, or they don't want to talk about it. They think they're the only ones. And the cool thing about people who are honest, and that's one thing I love about comedians like Jim Norton and people who are just so brutally honest sometimes about themselves and their own flaws. I think people like that, because I think when you see celebrities or people that you like on TV or during interviews, I guess you assume that they don't have the same issues that the regular person has, the same anxiety and stuff like that. I mean, I talk about it on the show. I have a small anxiety attack before every episode. I don't know why. This is episode 41. I've been doing it for over a year, but it's I can't. It's just one of those things where it's you just, I guess you don't have much control over it. You try to do your best, but it's one of those things where I'm human too, and I also have those issues. So I think it's awesome that you talk about that. And what made it easy for you to talk about it, to be so open?
I mean, I think part of it is just that's my personality. I'm going to be honest. I think that I'm the kind of person who just overshares anyway and is really, really open. But I also do feel a small sense of responsibility. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have a platform. I've been really lucky enough that a lot of the things that I've tried to do in this sort of interesting, weird career path of being a freelance science communicator has opened up a lot of doors and has given me a platform. People listen, they're there, they follow me on Twitter, they come to Facebook, they download my podcast, and that is really amazing, and it makes me feel very lucky. And because of that, I feel like I have, a small sense of obligation to actually be really frank and really honest, because a lot of people who are dealing with this kind of stuff don't have that kind of a platform. So somebody who's dealing with depression in their everyday lives, they might not have an outlet to talk about it, and they might not have a way that they can share it with other people to help other people understand that it's actually a lot more common than you think, and that a lot of us are going through it. But because people are there listening, why not be really open and honest? Then it's there's nothing to hide. It's easier for me because then I never have to lie and then I don't have to worry about trying to cover up a lie. And also, the feedback has just been amazing. I just talk really frankly about what I'm going through and about my insights into what some of my friends and family and fans have gone through. And I just get the most incredible messages from people sharing their stories, and it makes me feel really good. So it's a bit selfish, to be honest, but I also do feel a bit why not? I have this platform. I should probably be using it.
Yeah, that's awesome, because it's one of those things where I feel like I said before, like I think people do have a hard time talking about it, and when they do hear somebody like you, who it's weird because you assume somebody who you've talked in front of big groups of people, you've been on in front of a camera a bunch of times, so to think that you deal with some of these issues was just it's surprising at times, but it's just like in a way it's not, because when I used to do shows, it was fun, but it took me a while before I got lost in like the performance, and then you forget about it, and then that's when you felt comfortable. But I always had those jitters before, and like, what are people gonna think? And it's like, and as much as like I try to not worry about what people think, I guess it's just human. It's a human instinct to always worry about how am I gonna come off? I don't want to offend anybody. Are they gonna like me? Are they gonna like this? And it's just like those are just constant battles that we have in our head. And I think it's like I said, I think it's nice when you hear people talk about that stuff, because it's all battles that a lot of people have, and that's what I love about podcasting. I think that I talked about this with Adam Scorgi. We're both we're not just podcasters, but we're huge podcast fans. Like I'm sure you are too. And it gets you away from like insecurities. It gets you away from work. It gets you away. It's almost like, it's funny because I grew up listening to metal and a lot of underground music, industrial music, and under metal and hardcore and stuff like that. And that was kind of my getaway from like everyday life. And like now as I get older, like podcasting has become like my new alternative, because it's like I'm getting into a subject that I might not know a lot about, so I'm thinking about it, and it's getting me away from everyday world. So how did you deal with it growing up? Did you were you on anything? Did you was it music? Was it anything like that? What was your therapy?
Yeah, so from the time I was pretty young, I was actually in therapy. So that really helped. I think that my parents were pretty supportive of that, and they were understanding that maybe that was something I needed. I didn't take any antidepressants, so I didn't take any drugs when I was young. I did love music. I was a singer all through kind of elementary school, middle school, high school, college. I was like a jazz singer, a semi-professional jazz singer. And that was really big for me. I also did my fair share of drugs when I was in high school and college. And, I had that outlet, having fun with my friends, like getting outside of my own head. The crazy thing is that I don't now. It's been a long time. Probably the last time I smoked weed was when I was maybe like 25. I'm maybe even 23. I'm 30 now. I'm actually about to be 31. And the last time that I did like anything harder than pot was probably when I was like 22. So, or maybe even younger. So I think about it, and like, I don't even drink. Like, I never am not sober, which is kind of crazy. It's a weird way to live your life, but I don't know. It works for me. But there was definitely a time in my life where I had fun. I mean, it was mostly recreational. I never really had any problems with like addiction or anything like that, except with cigarettes. Cigarettes are very fucking addictive. Like, that was a hard one to kick. But with everything else that I did and tried, it was fun for me. It was a way for me to relax. It was a way for me to bond with my friends. It was a way for me to expand my mind and learn about my own self and my body and my limitations. And then I kind of didn't need it anymore. But yeah, I finally started taking meds, antidepressants, a couple of years ago. And I had that same experience that I think a lot of people have, where after they finally take the drugs that are right for them, sometimes you have to play and you try one thing and it doesn't really work, and then you find the one that does work, and you take it, and you've got to take it for at least a week or two before it really normalizes and you start to feel the effects the way they're meant to be felt. And then all of a sudden you have this epiphany, like, why the fuck did I wait so long for this? It's awesome. Like, I feel sober and I feel healthy and I feel normal. I don't feel like I'm on drugs. I feel like the way that I probably could have been feeling all these years, and it's a godsend for me.
Yeah, I think the thing with depression, like even with my experiences, I remember when I had some issues with it. People would always be like, "Well, what's wrong? Like, what's?" And I'm always like, "Nothing." And they're like, "Oh, is it like finances? Is it girlfriend?
Yeah.
Is it whatever?" And I'm like, "No." I'm like, "Dude, honestly, I'm like, it's really as simple as I just I'm not motivated to do anything besides sit in my bed. I had this one situation. I don't think I've told the story on the air where when I turned 21, I started doing a lot of drinking because I came out of like a long-term relationship, and then of course when you're in your teens and early 20s, you think like it's the end of the world. So and then I started going out, and I needed to meet people or whatever. And alcohol was, and I didn't do a lot of drinking before, so like alcohol was my way of like loosening up and getting past that like anxiety and meeting people. So I didn't feel like I had an issue. I just felt like it was helping me socialize. It gave me a reason to, hey, you want to grab a drink? It gave me a reason to meet people or whatever. But fuck it did some things to my depression. Like I had this one situation where I drank so much that I sat in my room for 4 days with the doors locked, didn't leave, and just sat there, didn't eat, did nothing, and listened to, I'll never forget this. I listened to I don't know if you know who Under Oath is. On Define the Great Line, the last track on there. It's like, I forget, To Who It May Concern. I listened to that track. I had it on repeat, and it played for 4 days. And yeah, no. Seriously, it was crazy. Like my mom thought I killed myself, and she's like knocking on the door, and I was like, I just didn't say anything. It was like such a crazy thing. And then next thing you know, like I just snapped out of it, and I was like back to normal. And then people are like, what the fuck happened? I'm like, dude, honestly, I don't know. And they're like, what were you depressed over? I'm like, it's not that simple. It's just, you're not motivated to do anything. That's why when people, the Robin Williams thing recently, and people always kind of talk about, suicide. Well, they had this, they had that. I'm like, dude, it's not, you're thinking or looking at things in a logical perspective where you're saying, oh, well, you have money and you have this and you have that, but that's not the way you're looking at it when you're in that state of mind. And it's hard to snap out of it, and it's hard to really know what's causing it. I mean, that's why I've been lucky enough that I've always played some type of sports. I skateboarded when I was younger, and now I play basketball, and I exercise, I play music. So I'm always finding some therapy to keep my positive, emotions up or whatever. But it's I feel like if I don't do things, if I get stuck in like this routine of working and just doing the things I have to do and not really doing the things I want to do, then it doesn't take long before I'm just want to be left alone. And it's weird because I'm a very social person, but yet, at times I just want to be completely left alone. So it's just, being, into science and stuff like that. Was it the alcohol that caused that? I mean, what type of because obviously alcohol has a lot of different effects on you, but is there a direct link between that and like maybe provoking depression or making it worse, inflaming it?
Yeah, I think that the issue is that when you deal with psychiatric illness anyway, whether that's a mood disorder or an anxiety disorder or something else, substance abuse is a really big exacerbator of that. So I sincerely doubt that like drinking alcohol caused depression in you. It's probably something that you've been dealing with your whole life, same as me, or at least for, quite a while. But it's like the worst thing you can do when you're like really depressed is just drink yourself for depression. It's definitely never, I don't think there's any good evidence out there that alcohol is like a good medication for depression, or that it like, it'll help you bring out of a depressive episode. But I do think it's important, like the things that you were just mentioning, this conversation about, but what's wrong? What's making you depressed? That there's not, it's like you said, it's not that simple. That's a more logical way to look at it. And depression is different for different people too. Like for you felt it as just this complete lack of motivation. And that's a really common symptom when I experience depressive episodes. I also feel sad. Some people don't really feel sad when they're depressed, or at least they can't put their finger on it. They feel more numb, like they don't feel anything. I feel sad, like tearful, like very sad. And that is heavily linked to not wanting to get out of bed. And it's not like I would spend days and days in bed just staring at the wall. I would just sleep a lot. Like I would be sleeping like 14, 15 hours a day. Like I'm awesome at sleeping even now. And so when I'm depressed, it's a very easy excuse, and it's a very easy way for me to just ignore what's happening in my body, ignore what's happening in my brain, and just escape from it. And yeah, people say, what's going on? What was the impetus? What made you feel sad? Why do you feel sad? And you're like, I don't fucking know. I just feel sad. I can't put my finger on it. And that's when you get this really negative feedback loop, which I think is common with people who have struggled with depression for long periods of time, is that a lot of times, especially people who are intelligent and people who have a strong internal locus of control, people who feel like they want to maintain control over things and they're good at getting things done. So people say, why are you sad? And you say, I don't know why I'm sad. And then you start thinking, wait, why am I sad? Things are pretty good in my life. Like, I have this going for me, I have that going for me. And then all of a sudden you start to be like, fuck you. Why are you depressed? That's fucked up. There are people who are dealing with things that are way worse. So now you have this double-edged sword where not only are you dealing with depression, you're dealing with feeling guilty about feeling depressed, which is a really bad headspace to be in. And that's why I think things like therapy are so incredibly helpful to me, because my therapist, at least, and I think a lot of people have this same experience, is very good at helping me understand what I can and can't control. He's really good at helping me understand what's kind of when I'm allowed to be a little bit selfish, how to listen to what's going on in my head, and how to divorce myself from these intense feelings of guilt that I struggle with a lot in my particular kind of brand of depression.
Yeah, well, I definitely have dealt with that too. And I think that was like my way of at times to snap out of it. Like you said, you kind of go do it as like I have a soft spot for anybody who has like a disability or anything like that. And it's just like, I remember when I was like growing up, and obviously every band says, hey, once we make it, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. But, I used to say, I'm like, I'm going to let a bunch of whoever's disabled and comes to our shows, they get front row seats. I'm like, because it was just like anytime I see somebody who can smile and they're in, and they dealt with real shit, either they're a vet or came back, it was in the military, lost a leg or whatever, or somebody who can't see. I have a buddy recently who it just, I forget what it's called. It's something, it's pretty rare, but he's losing his vision, and it just came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden, little by little, he's legally blind, and it's just like, he's in his early 40s. So to go your whole life with seeing and now losing it, I almost, it's funny, I had this conversation with him, like, I don't know what's worse, to be born without sight and not know what you're missing out on, or to lose it in life and know the beauty that you're missing out on. And it is a pretty interesting debate, what would be worse. But and I see people who go through stuff like this, and it's just like, holy shit! Like I feel so selfish, like you said, for like those days that you're down, and you're like, what am I down about? I'm like, there's people who have it way worse, and it's true. I mean, people do have it way worse, and I think that there is something nice about putting things in perspective. The materialistic world we live in, we definitely spend way more time talking about the things we don't have than the things we do have. And I just went to a funeral last week. My buddy's father passed away. He was 55, and it was one of those things where, like, I always say this at funerals, I'm like, the one good thing that comes out of funerals is that it always reminds everybody that tomorrow's not promised. And I think when you wake up every single day and as much as we say, oh, we know tomorrow's not promised, we don't live forever, it's like we still wake up every day. So it's hard to really convince yourself, like, holy shit, anything could happen. And, we don't know how long we're here for, which is why I think it's important to do the things you love. And that's why it's cool that, to see people who are successful like you, who are doing the things they love and following their dreams. And I think it's motivation. And like we talked about before we went on the air, Joe Rogan is responsible for like Christopher Ryan's successful podcast, yours, Daniele Bignelli, who's been a guest on my show. He was one of the coolest guys. I mean, he was a guest on my show when I had literally nothing to sell him. Nobody's been on, and I'm like, want to be on my show, And so he was really cool, and it was really cool for him to be on. And who knew? I could have done like 2 shows and then been done with it. And he came on, and a year later I'm still doing it. So, but it's cool to see people who motivate, because somebody like Rogan and who tells people, hey, do what you enjoy. Don't, he talks a lot about it being like a comedian, and like, oh, if you want to do stand up, then fucking do stand up. Don't make these excuses of oh, I don't have time, or I don't have this. I work a full-time job, and this is just a passion that it's an awful investment if you talk to any investor, because
it's true.
yeah, exactly. So but it's just one of those things where I love doing this. I love contacting people that I'm a fan of, and being able to sit down and talk with them and meeting people. And to me, it's like when you kind of work an unfulfilled job and you want to feel like you're doing something. I've had, Dr. Gregory A. Smith, who did the movie American Addict, and he's big into addiction and stuff like that, and really cool guy, and just really pushing, having these issues with big pharma, and being a doctor and coming out and speaking against big pharma and the for-profit, organizations or companies that are big pharma. And for him to, like, he emailed me after the show, and he's like, oh, I appreciate what you're doing and all this stuff. And it's like, it was just that little email that like reminded me why I'm doing it, and it's awesome. And I'm sure I've heard you talk about that too. And I know everybody says I really appreciate these emails and stuff like that, but I'm sure you actually do. And I'm sure every one of them is a little bit of a reminder of why you wake up in the morning. And sometimes when you probably want to sleep for days, you wake up in the morning and do what you do. And so like I said, I think it's awesome. I mean, you're so honest that you do something that women don't even do in private, and that's reveal their weight. He did. So I thought that was hilarious. I'm like, did she really just? I'm like, what? I'm like, that's like the one rule where you're like, you never ask a female's weight. So it was hilarious.
Yeah, her weight or her age, and I say my age all the time too. Yeah, that was actually I had Sandra Doherty on my podcast. I did an episode with Sex Nerd Sandra. If you don't know her, she does the Sex Nerd Sandra podcast for Nerdist Network, and she's been around a while. She really knows the podcast ropes, and she's a good friend of mine too. And we were just talking about like body image, and I mean, I didn't want to do a whole episode about that. I didn't even plan on it. It just kind of came up, and it's been something that's been looming in my head for the last 2 years, and never did before that, because I never had to worry about it before that because I was skinny. Like I grew up skinny, and in college I was skinny, and even as I was in my mid-20s and getting older, I was just skinny. And it's not because I did anything to be skinny. I'm a fucking Texan. I eat like steak and potatoes every day. It's terrible. And I don't exercise as much as I should. I just naturally, that's what my body wanted to do. And then a lot of things happened, and it's hard to point to exactly which variable it is, but you get an office job. I worked at HuffPost for over a year, maybe a year and a half as a correspondent there, which means that I was like in the newsroom every day. That's very different than just doing freelance where you're out in the field on your feet all day. So you get an office job, you start taking antidepressants, you have one or two relatively successful relationships where you're happy. Happiness makes you fat. Like this is a truth. And so all of these things happen. Also, I get older. I'm going to be 31 actually next month in October. And all of those things combined, you start to go, oh, wait, this is what people are talking about. This is what, whenever you talk to that person and they go, you just wait until your metabolism catches up to you. And you're like, yeah, whatever. And then you're like, oh shit, what's happening to my body? And that's where I am now. I'm in the growing pains portion of trying to figure out like, okay, I weigh more than I used to, like a lot more. And yes, I was probably too skinny before. And now I am, according to every doctor and every, workout person and every BMI, I'm a healthy weight. But I'm on TV all the time. I look at my body in the mirror and it looks weird and it looks different. But at the same time, there's a part of me that goes, hey, cool, I look like a normal person, and I kind of like that. But finding that balance is hard because as a woman in media, as a woman who's starting to get a little bit older in media, and as somebody who knows that the camera does add pounds, like I got to be honest about it. I look at myself in the mirror and it's like I'm of two minds, just like I am about most things in the world. One day I go, yeah, I like the way I look. I look good and I look like a real woman and I think that's great. And the next day I go, holy shit, I'm so fat. I need to work out. Why did I just eat cheesecake? And it fucks with your head, and you've got to find kind of that middle ground a little bit. It's motivating me to be a little bit healthier, which I think is good, but I'm trying not to let it get in my head too much because I see how much that destroys so many amazing women. Just how body image issues in this country are a big problem, and I refuse to let it do that to me.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that society has just molded us to believe that we should look a certain way, and if you don't, then then something's wrong with you. And I think there is something nice about if you feel or if you look good, sometimes you do feel good. But what is the problem is you have to look a certain way that might be unhealthy to think that you look good. I mean, we're like you said, so if you're a little thicker or whatever, you might look good in general, but because on TV, on these magazines and all this stuff. I mean, and then everybody's super skinny, and then it's like, if I don't look like that, or it also causes issue with guys, because guys are like, I want my girlfriend to look like that. Oh, my girlfriend's gaining weight. And I'm like, dude, your girl is not that big. And
it's like, she's still hot. Like, you're lucky to be fucking her.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And there's also different cultural expectations, right?
Oh, did I lose you?
So like I'm half Hispanic, whatever that means. But I have friends who are, like black girls who have a totally different expectation of what's sexy in that culture, or Hispanic girls who have a totally different expectation of what's sexy in that culture. Like I look at a billboard of Beyonce and I'm like, well, she's way bigger than I am. Yeah. And she's really fucking hot and people know that she's hot. And so it's like, it takes all types and everybody is different. And I think being your best self, whatever that means, is probably a better way to look at it than trying to be what somebody else's version of your best self is. And really, I think it's about health. You can look like you're all different shapes and sizes and still be unhealthy or be healthy. So, if your cholesterol is in check, if your pulse is where it's supposed to be, if you're, on your feet enough during the day, if you're eating well to make you feel good, which I'm still trying to work on, I don't think it should be the way that your body looks is not a very good measure of how healthy you are. I mean, there are extremes. You can be too skinny if you're struggling with an eating disorder. It can be obvious from the outside world that you're not healthy because you have no muscle tone. Or you can be obese, and from the outside world, it can be quite obvious that you are not healthy because you are carrying way too much body fat. But there is a huge range of that in between where people look different and they're different and they could all be equally healthy. And I think that's something that we have to own. We have to own that and we have to be comfortable with that. But as you said before, you're talking about kind of nerves and you're talking about different types of people's depression. And, the truth is everybody struggles with self-confidence. Like, we don't like to admit it. We don't like to admit, because it's like we want to always have a confidence that we sort of wear on our sleeve. Like I always look confident and I always act confident, but we're all a little bit unsure. We're all a little bit worried. Do people like me? How did I come across in that meeting? I really hope that person that I really look up to doesn't think I'm a loser. And that's normal and that's healthy. And that's something that we struggle with. A big part of that is looking in the mirror every morning and trying to be happy with who we are as people, and I hate that our culture puts 99% of the weight on how we look and only like 1% of the weight on what we do on like the things that we focus on in our life. I think being good people and being healthy people is a lot more to do with how we feel than how we look. But you're right, there is some connection there. And so I think it's about taking control and feeling as good about the you that's the honest you, the true you. And a big part of that comes from, eating better and exercising, but not trying to look like a model. Because sorry, that's like 1%. That's like less than 1% of real people.
Well, like you said, like society, a perfect example of society molding what we find attractive is you look at Latins and like you said, black guys love big girls. I mean, I have my buddy Jake, he's always liked bigger girls, and he's a good looking tall dude, and he's dated some girls that were huge and in the past, and we're like, Jake, really, you like her? And he's like, yeah, man, and I'm just like, and we know it's not because he wants to, and yes. and the thing is, the crazy thing about Latin and black girls is that you never see them thrown up in the bathroom or trying to be skinnier or having depression issues or it's like it doesn't matter how big they are, they have confidence. Like, I mean, go to a Enrique Iglesias concert and you'll just see girls that shouldn't be wearing tube tops and so it just, they definitely don't have a confidence issue. And to go what you're talking about, the height weight thing, I have a huge problem with that doctor's height weight thing, because like you said, it's so deceiving. Just looking at somebody's height,
BMI is not a good measure.
Yeah, I mean, just to look at somebody's height and weight doesn't tell you if they're healthy. There's people who are 95, 100 pounds and aren't healthy. Like, body fat percentage is very important. What you're eating, what there's what type of weight are you holding? Is it muscle? Is it fat? Is it So it just there's.
Yeah. I mean, look at me 4 years ago and look at me now. Like 4 years ago, I weighed 95 pounds. Right now, I weigh 130 pounds. That's a huge fucking difference. 35 pounds. That's a third of my body weight that I gained. And if you look at my body between then and now, I look different. I don't look significantly different, but I look different. My health is the exact same. Like, I can promise you, I'm eating the same way, I'm exercising the same way. I wasn't doing anything different back then. I did smoke. That probably helped me stay skinny, which is not a good weight loss regimen, I promise you. But outside of that, it's like, yeah, I was probably actually less healthy then because I was a smoker and I was, yeah, sure, I was skinny. And a lot of people would go, oh, you look great, you have a flat stomach, you whatever. But like, I was probably too skinny. And now I'm probably a much healthier weight. I think I should say, though, to your point, about like all of my Latina ladies out there and all of my Black girlfriends out there. I do think that there are struggles in every culture with self-confidence. I think that certain cultures allow for it to be outside a little bit more, allow for it to be public a little bit more. And sometimes I almost feel worse for people who live in cultures where it's kind of not that accepted to be outspoken about struggles with depression, or it's, I mean, kind of no culture it's accepted yet, but we're really moving the bar. But there are definitely cultures that because of religious influence or because of any other, historical influence, it's even less acceptable. And so a lot of times too, when you see somebody who has a whole lot of self-confidence, let's not forget that that can be like a really good coping mechanism. I come across as incredibly confident, and I can assure you that I am not. And I think that's just something that I learned throughout my life. It's the way that I shield all of my internal pain from the outside world. And so sometimes, they say you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. And I think that's something that we all have to remember sometimes, is that everybody struggles and everybody wonders and everybody is a little bit insecure and everybody has problems. And we should be empathetic to that, because you never know what somebody's going through when you run into them on the street. No matter how big their smile is.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it's funny because as I got older, I started noticing people's insecurities more. Like, you'll see like the group of dudes that like all have that like super small t-shirt on with like the same tribal tattoo, and they all look like identical. And I'm like, you guys are all, it's like one of those things. They all look very confident, but I'm sure if you got to know them, I mean, even me, when I first started lifting weights, I was a metalhead in like middle school and early high school, and I always wore like Slayer and Metallica shirts, and then once I'm like, dude, I want to feel better about myself, so I started exercising for that purpose too. It wasn't, now I'm more about health, but at that time it was more just trying to make myself feel better and feel more confident. Yeah. So but I see people today that I'm like, okay, you're huge. Like you did it. Like you accomplished whatever you're trying to accomplish. I'm like, so it makes you wonder how much of it is just like some internal issue that they're fighting, and they're just trying to feel better about themselves. And it can go too far. I see people at the gym who just spend way too much money and time at the gym, and not for a sport, not because they're competing in anything. And it makes you wonder like how much of it is because they're just trying to fill this emptiness or trying to just help your self-confidence. You have some insecurity you're trying to cover up. So I think that's a very important point. I mean, I've met a lot of really pretty girls that you would think are super, confident, don't have any issues. Then you meet them and you're like, holy shit, the reason why they're always dressed up and they look so pretty is because they are making up for a little bit of insecurities. I never leave the house not looking somewhat presentable, and a lot of that is like insecurities. I know people are like, I don't give a fuck, I won't do my hair, I won't, and it's just like, well, that guy's probably more comfortable with himself than I am, or
he's more comfortable with certain aspects. I'm really bad about, like, people can't see, but I like am wearing pajamas and I don't have any makeup on. I never wear makeup unless I'm on camera, like legit on camera. I fucking
How
don't
dare
understand.
You mean this isn't a real show?
No. I know. But I do not understand when girls need to spend 2 hours every morning to leave the house to feel comfortable. But I'm also not going to judge them for that. Like, I just don't have it in me. I think it's because I'm impatient. Like, I will go anywhere after getting ready for 5 minutes. That's part of who I am. But I have other ways, it's the way that I talk. It's the way that I carry myself. It's the way that I sometimes feel the need to be like alpha when I'm in a conversation. Like, oh, wait, let me say something smart. Like, I don't need to say something smart. I don't need to prove myself. But we all have different insecurities, and I think we cover them up in different ways. And I think you're right that there is kind of a fine line between a normal level of insecurity, which probably goes deeper than most people think, and something becoming a bit clinical and something becoming almost diagnosable. We think about body dysmorphic disorder, we think about anorexia, we think about bulimia, and we think about those things as being like traditionally female problems, but they're really not. Like, look at the guys that you run into at the gym. Look at the guys who, like you said, are so roided out of their minds that the concept of sex has long since left their heads. They have no sex drive anymore. They're massive. They're not doing it to impress the girls. They're not really doing it to impress other guys around the gym. There's some of that, but I think a lot of it is that they're doing it because they still feel like they're not there yet. And what is it inside that tells them, wait, I'm still not here yet, when you're almost looking kind of scary big? You know what I mean? Like unhealthy, like you scare people away when they look at you. They go, oh my God, that guy's like not normal. It's obvious that you're doing so many drugs in order to be that large, yet they still have a sense of, no, I'm not big enough. I'm not there yet. That's something inside, and it's a dark place, and we all have that place, and we're literally just like one decision away from losing it and going into that place. And that's why I think that therapy and medication when necessary is something that we have to be more open about, and we have to get rid of the stigma about it, because there are people left and right who are struggling, who are just like me and who are just like you, who just are kind of not comfortable admitting to themselves that that's what they're dealing with. Well, and we're not comfortable as a society admitting it. We're not comfortable saying, oh, that guy's not well. Like, that's sad. That's not something we should be making fun of. It's not something where we should be going, oh, fuck him, or, oh, what a dick. We should be going like, oh, God, that's like, he's in a rough place, obviously, and he needs help. Like, that's what it is.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. But I think the thing with medications is that, you know, I do have a little bit of issue with like some of the, I saw this really good documentary years ago called, I don't know how old it is. It's Making a Killing, and it's all about like the DSM, and it's on YouTube and stuff like that. Guys, check it out. And I know there's you know, like the DSM 4 or 5, whatever edition it was, like there's a lot of links between some of the, you know, some of the, I guess they had, some of them had, I think I saw a statistic, like 69% of them had done some work linked to big pharma or some of the companies and stuff like that. So that does scary, because like the term,
it's very scary. Yeah, you're right.
The term chemical imbalance scares me, because it's like, you know, I know a lot of people who have been told that, you know, here's this drug for this chemical imbalance, and there really isn't much testing for it. So it's like, so it's a chemical. Which chemicals imbalance? How imbalanced is it? And how do you know, what are you regulating? So it's like you're giving, and I know people who are retired prison officers who say, you want an antidepressant. I'm like, you just say you're a little down or whatever. They're like, they hand it out like candy, you know? And so it's just like, you know, it's a big issue with like for-profit or, you know, companies. But, you know, that's the thing about the medical system, you know, medicines. I mean, the other thing is like the fact that medicines are only pharmaceuticals. Like we don't ever see as like maybe vitamins or nutrition being medicine, and it's like for the longest time that was medicine. I mean, I was born in Portugal, but I came here at a young age. But my parents, they were raised there and stuff like that, and they used to like all their medicines came from foods, and like, I mean, I guess it kind of sounded like a witch doctor type thing, but it like a lot of it, you know, they had a local person who would say, hey, eat more of this, or take this vitamin or whatever, and or take this herb or this tea, and a lot of things, you know, helped. And I think that those things should always be a first resort, and a synthetic thing should always be a last resort, because I think like historically, you know, throughout the beginning of civilization, we've taken in the same type of foods. Our bodies recognize it. It knows what we're eating. It knows this is good, this is bad, this is waste, or whatever. Now we're, you know, we taken these pharmaceutical drugs. Our body doesn't know what the fuck it is, and that's probably why we're having a lot of side effects. Of course, I'm an idiot, and I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm assuming, but you know, I'm waiting for you to be like, no, but.
Well, here's my take on this, and I think that for me, it's about trying to inform myself as well as I can based on available evidence. I completely understand I shouldn't even say fears, but the skepticism of big pharma, and I have it too. So for me, it's about having a nuanced perspective. I am incredibly skeptical of big pharma, but I also refuse to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because of course we know that there are medications on the market that save lives, where people, if they didn't have access to these medications, would be dead, or they would be in a lot of pain. And we know this to be a fact, and it's not some sort of vast conspiracy. These pharmaceutical companies work really hard to learn about new compounds that can be beneficial to health and human safety. But that doesn't mean that there aren't also bad business practices there, because we have a for-profit healthcare model in this country. And in some ways, that's a necessary evil, because there is kind of an impetus to invent. There's an impetus to move forward and to not be complacent. Let's put a lot of money into R&D of these certain molecules. It's very expensive to try and learn how a molecule interacts with your body. First, you have to do computational testing, then you have to go through animal testing, then you have to go through drug trials on people. But when we can see that there's a significant benefit to somebody using a drug over not using it, it's almost unethical not to make that compound available to people. I think one of the biggest problems with the way that we view healthcare, specifically in this country, but in a lot of kind of modern Western countries, is that we don't take enough personal control for our health. If the issue were that people who were struggling with psychiatric illness specifically went to their doctor and said, I'm in such a bad way that I'm afraid that I'm not able to function appropriately. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I think that maybe it might be time for me to try something for my anxiety or something for my depression above and beyond, the St. John's wort that I've been taking, or above and beyond the therapeutic things that I've been doing. And the doctor said, that's great. Let's talk about your options. The problem is that, like you said, it's too easy. It's too much a first pass solution. It's too much like, fill out this questionnaire. Oh, fuck. Okay, you could probably benefit from these meds. And that can be very dangerous. But again, it's such a gray area. It's such a complicated issue, and it's on such a continuum. Would I want to see people struggling with schizophrenia not have Haldol available to them, not have antipsychotics available to them? Fuck no. Would I personally want to go another day in my life without this SSRI? I don't think I would. But I know plenty of people who probably never should have taken those meds to begin with. I know people who probably never should have been prescribed speed because they weren't dealing with something debilitating in their ADHD. They were dealing with some sort of behavioral changes that they could have worked on, but instead they got hooked on speed, and that's a problem, So I'm really of two minds about it, and I think what we can't do is we can't dismantle the system. We can't say, oh, let's make it so that no drugs are available. That's fucking insane. We need these drugs. Diabetics need insulin, you know what I mean? Schizophrenics need Haldol, and I need citalopram. I can say that overtly. But I also have taken the time to educate myself about what it is that I am taking, what I'm putting in my body, and how it's affecting me. And I think that we need to see more comfort in speaking out about our ailments. We need to be less afraid and treat it less like it's some private thing to be ashamed of. And that way we can learn from each other more. You shouldn't have to troll like deeply hidden message boards to learn about this new drug that's on the market because you're afraid to let people know. You should be able to openly talk to your friends and your family and your doctors and say, I'm at a place right now where I can't function and I don't feel well, and I think I need help. And that should be a conversation you're allowed to have.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that a big problem is that we look at the symptoms and then we give a pill for it instead of looking at what's causing the symptom. It's like,
I agree.
Can diet help? Can exercise help? It's like if you have knee pain, they give you some painkiller, but it's like all you're doing is covering up, numbing up the pain. It's like, well, why not take glucose? I mean, I've had bad joints for a long time. I've had my share of injuries, and I've taken joint formula for years. And is it going to do miracles? No, but does it help lubricate my joints? Does it help with inflammation? MSM is a natural anti-inflammatory. Glucosamine helps with the cartilage and all this stuff. So it helps, and it's not that it's going to help everybody, but the fact that if you go to a doctor, it's not even an option. Like they don't even say, hey, what's your diet? Or maybe you should lose weight, get some weight, get some weight off your joints and stuff like that. Or even doing, strengthening your muscles to take some weight off your joints and help with your joint pain. And so it's just like there's all these options. It's just like, okay, here's your symptoms, and then here's your pill for it. And I just feel like that system is there's something. But you're right. There obviously you can't. That's why and Rogan talks about it, and I've talked about it numerous times on the show about like how there's always a pro this or anti this, and there's a huge gray area. It's just like the gun battle. It's like, oh, well, if you give everybody a gun, we're safer. But if and somebody else says no, but if you take everybody's guns away, we're safer. And it's like, well, no, I think there's a happy medium, and we I think we're still tribal people. We still pick teams. It's just like you pick a team. Oh, I'm a Chevy guy, and you're a Ford guy. Fuck Ford. It's like It's like, so just, I think we do that even with every debate, with everything, oh, you're a Verizon guy, I'm a whatever. So it just, I think that we have to look, like you said, we can't, as much, and even though I think people's heart are in the right place, I think, saying that, hey, big pharma's evil, this and that, Monsanto, and I know that, you're where you stand on GMOs and stuff. I think that we do have to look at, the statistic, look at, can it be beneficial? Because, throwing it all away, it is going to maybe take away some things that are corrupt. I know there's tons of pharmaceutical drugs that have been on the market, so it's proven FDA safe and then taken off the market a year later, which obviously means something was wrong,
Yes.
So things like that do happen. But if how do you fix it? You can't throw it all away and get rid of all companies.
Like, if you're outside of the system and you're pounding on the walls and you're just going, you're corrupt, you're fucked up, you have these bad business practices. And I agree, like a company sells AIDS medication to a community in Africa at 10 times the rate that they sell AIDS medication to a community in the Netherlands. That's a problem. That's a big fucking problem because they're trying to make money where there's demand. So that's where they're going to bring the supply. That's disgusting. But at the same time, you are going to be the biggest terrorist in the world if you were to go into that pharmaceutical laboratory and burn it to the ground. If you were to flush all the pills, if you were to destroy the formulations because you didn't want that company to make money. Because what's the lesser of two evils there? Yes, it's gross, and it's bad, and people die, and people are really injured by greed. We see it historically across the board, but at the same time, people are really going to fucking die if they can't have access to life-saving medication. It's just insane to think that it has to be one or the other. It's got to be somewhere in the middle. And so I would love to see more and more reform towards moving into a more public healthcare system in this country, moving into a place where sickness is not incentivized, where wellness is incentivized, moving into a place where everybody has access to basic health care because we know that that's a human right. I think that those are the kinds of changes that will start putting us in a better direction. I don't think we should be getting rid of medicine. Yeah. I definitely do think we should be educating ourselves about how things are prescribed, I'm appalled by how many people I meet and I say they take a pill with dinner or something. I go, oh, what are you taking? I don't know what it's called. What's it for? It's like a thing I have. It's like, how do you fucking not know the drugs you're taking? That's insane. You're putting something in your body that has a real intense effect and you don't even know what it is or what it got prescribed for. That's crazy. How can you trust your doctor that much? And so for me, what you were talking about, go to an OD, go to a doctor of osteopathy. These are really cool people because they have medical degrees, legitimate medical degrees from accredited universities. These people are no different than a regular doctor that you would go to in any doctor's office. But their OD training, this osteopathic training, also had them look at a more holistic view of medicine. Now, I'm discriminating between an OD and a holistic doctor, which you can't see me, but I have in air quotes right now. A holistic doctor is oftentimes somebody with a PhD in English who likes to prescribe herbs and tinctures to make you feel better, and it's not fucking based on any science, and it's really a counter to the fear-mongering out there of the anti-big pharma and anti-medical industrial complex crowd. It's not based on science, and it's scary, and it's not healthy, and you do need medicine if there's something, if you have a fucking infection and you need an antibiotic, that antibiotic could prevent you from dying from a very simple infection like tonsillitis or strep throat. Streptococcus will kill you, and unless you take an antibiotic, you may not be able to get rid of it. That being said, on the flip side, traditional medical facilities are overprescribing antibiotics like nobody's fucking business, and it's making us way the fuck sicker. If you go to a DO's practice, they learned everything that a normal doctor learns in medical school. They have a medical degree and they're licensed to practice medicine, but their view is holistic. Their view is, let's not look at the symptom and just treat the symptom right now. Let's try and figure out what's wrong. Let's try and understand the disease and the entire disease process and why you're seemingly more susceptible to that disease. Some things are genetic. You're going to get them. Some things are, you're fucking unlucky and you got an infection, and that's the way it is. Some people try to talk about, oh, the mosquitoes can't breed unless the swamp is dirty, and it's a fucking bullshit thing that I hear a lot of times from people who don't look at the science. You and I could easily catch Ebola. Like, we just could. You know what I mean? If we were exposed to it, we could catch Ebola, and it would fucking suck, and we would have to do everything within our power to fight it. Yes, some people might be able to catch Ebola easier because they have compromised immune systems, because they're also sick in these other ways. And if we can work on that, then we can have more preventive medicine, and we can make sure that we're healthier. I can do things in my life right now, like sleep enough and eat the right foods and get enough exercise, that make it so that it's harder for me to catch a cold. But ultimately, if I do catch that cold, it's not because I didn't do enough. It's because colds fucking get caught, because viruses have evolved over millennia to be picked up by living organisms. They want to be in your body, and they want to make you sick. And that's just the way that life is. So again, you've got to be of two minds about these things. We've got to stop with the victim blaming, but we also need to be more responsible for our own health. That's my soapbox. I'm getting off it now.
Aren't we becoming more immune to antibiotics too? Because of don't they say because they give it to the animals and stuff we eat and stuff? So that's another reason why we're becoming more immune to it.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much it's about eating the animal that took the antibiotic as much as it's about the animals having, like, almost all farm animals are dosed up on antibiotics, which is a huge problem. Like, some insane statistic, don't quote me on this, but I think it's somewhere between like 70 and 90% of the antibiotics in this country just go to livestock. Like, they're not even for people.
I've read that, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a really high statistic. So the issue is less about they take an antibiotic and then we eat the antibiotic and then we like absorb its powers or something. Like, it doesn't work that way. It's really that when an organism has an antibiotic in them, what they're doing is they're making the bacteria stronger. So there's bacteria out there that antibiotic was developed to target. And when there's always a small amount of mutant anything in the environment, that's just the way that it works. We have small genetic mutations. You have them, I have them, we have hundreds of them. And this is how natural selection works. It's how evolution works. There's some organism in a huge population of organisms that has some sort of mutant situation in it, whether it confers an advantage or a disadvantage. If it confers an advantage to that organism is going to be more likely to be able to survive. Whether it gets killed less often, it lives long enough to breed, whatever the case may be, it divides more readily. And eventually you start to see that mutant thing that happened in its DNA be more prevalent in the population because it conferred some sort of population advantage. Like, that's all natural selection is. It's very simple when you think about it. So the same thing happens in bacteria. And with our antibiotics right now, what ends up happening is all these different cows take a specific antibiotic. The bacteria that antibiotic was developed to kill is, there's millions of them in nature. They're all around the cow. They're living on the cow's mouth. They're living in its guts. Most of them die because that cow takes that antibiotic. Some of them already were a bit antibiotic resistant just naturally. It was a normal mutation that they had. But now they can start to populate. And they populate more and more. And the more vectors they have, the more cows that are walking around taking those antibiotics for preventive reasons. And we see it in people too. The more we take an antibiotic for a cold, which you should never fucking do because a cold is viral, the more that we take antibiotics before we've been sick for like a week, before we really know whether or not our own immune system is going to fight off that bacterium, the more that we take them preventatively, like, oh, I'm going to take it because I'm going to be on a plane and I don't want to get sick, the more that we have antibiotics in a way that they were not meant to be taken and in a way that confers that advantage in the population of bacteria that are already resistant, the more that we're going to see that bacteria grow and proliferate and become more resistant. So now we're at a place where, for example, penicillin, which many people have an allergy to, penicillin is the only drug left that cures strep throat. Is the only drug left, and a lot of people can't take it. There's only one drug left on the market that can cure gonorrhea, and some people have an antibiotic-resistant version of that gonorrhea now. What happens when there are no more antibiotics left that can target gonorrhea? You just get gonorrhea, and unless your body fights it off on your own, you're fucked. You get sicker and sicker and sicker. And we're seeing this across the board. Antibiotic resistance is actually a massive medical crisis that we're dealing with right now. But as you said earlier, you look at the way Big Pharma operates, there are some real problems here. A lot of pharmaceutical companies have no incentive to make new antibiotics, to research new antibiotics that could help us, because you take an antibiotic once and then you're done with it. They don't make that much money off of them. They make money off of things like Lipitor and Prozac and the boner pill, because these are things people take for the rest of their lives. But when you take something one time to get rid of a disease, you kill the bacteria and then you're done with it. They don't have a lot of motivation to be coming up with new antibiotics. R&D is very minimal in the antibiotic world right now, and that's fucking scary. And so what we need to be doing is we need to be taking whatever personal control we have. Be careful with antibiotics. I'm not saying don't take them if you need them, but make sure you need them before you take them. That's a very important point.
Yeah, the thing is, you're right. There's no money in a cure. I mean, Chris Rock said it in one of his stand-up specials, and it's absolutely true. It just, there's no incentive to make, and I think that's where like corporations and science butt heads, because it's like, it's the same thing with like, Nikolai Tesla, one of the greatest inventors people have never heard of, because of the fact that, he was doing things because his passion for his work and for his discoveries, and not because he was trying to make more money. And JP,
like Edison was,
like Edison was, and that's why he looked up to Edison. And then they butt heads, and he was trying to, and I don't know if he ever accomplished it or even had an experiment even close, but I know he was trying to get everybody free electricity, and they found out you can't meter free electricity, and he was building these towers that were going to use the earth as a conductor, and you could just plug something into the ground. And who knows? I don't know enough about it to know if it was even possible. I do know when he died in a hotel in New York, the FBI took all his files and all this stuff. But, it's just one of those things where I think when people try to convince you that you need money for incentive to get anything accomplished, I think is insanity. Because there's a great book called Drive, and I always forget who the author is, but it's all about what really motivates people, and it's some of the greatest minds, and especially in science. You're around scientists all the time and people in different fields that are completely motivated by their research, and
Oh yeah, science is not the field you want to go into if you plan on making a lot of money. Yeah,
exactly. So this idea that you need money for incentive is insanity, and I think that sometimes it gets in the way. I don't know where I saw this, where they were talking about how a study where people who were motivated by money and their work were less successful than people who were just motivated by their work or just motivated by money, and I think like they both kind of collide, and they butt heads. And so I think that's really important. I think that, probably some of the reasons why people are so unhappy, you look at why people are especially in the East Coast. I live in Massachusetts near the Springfield area, and it's just one of those things where in the East Coast we're so fast paced. We never, like, it's work, pick up the kids, go to the gym, no. It's like we never have any time to like relax and chill. And it's like I have a buddy who's from San Antonio who moved up here some years ago, and he's so much more laid back, and he's just same thing. You meet anybody from like the West Coast or the South, and it's just like, dude, they enjoy live music, they enjoy barbecues, they enjoy and it's just like, I'm like, dude, that's so much of a healthier lifestyle, and
yeah.
And it's just, even my father grew up on a farm, but it's like my grandparents and his, parents and stuff like that, they all like lived pretty, long lives, eating, drinking, and enjoying life. And I wonder how much of that is the lack of stress. Maybe you're doing more physically demanding work, but you don't have the mental stress that
Totally. You're healthier because you're out there. You don't have office ass. You're out on your feet all day. You're doing things with your body, which we know is good for your body. You're probably eating more kind of locally sourced food. You're eating fresher food. You're eating unprocessed food. And you're also enjoying life a little bit more. I mean, stress underpins a lot of disease in this country. Like, we didn't evolve to have chronic stress. There's an incredible book by an incredible scientist named Robert Sapolsky, and it's got a great title. It's called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And just think about that title. He basically writes about the evolutionary history of stress and why organisms, complex organisms, especially animals, experience stress, and exactly what's happening physiologically in your body when you experience stress. Stress is incredibly important. We need to be able to understand what to do when we're under intense pressure. We need to know how to deal with a fight or flight situation. We need to have the cortisol and the different hormones that are released. We need to have the elevated heart rate and our pupils get really big, and we need to shunt blood away from our stomach and up to our brain. But we're not meant to live in that kind of a situation for chronic periods of time, that has all these detrimental effects on the body that we never evolved to be able to cope with. And this book really catalogs those things. And it's a scientific book, but it's an easy read, and it's beautifully written. There's some great talks by Robert Sapolsky too. If you don't want to pick up the book, but you just want to see him on YouTube giving some talks, I would check him out, because I think you're right. It's very important. And I think that some European nations have it. They know what they're doing a little more than we do, and definitely some island nations know what they're doing a little more than we do, where they have 30-hour work weeks and they have 4 weeks of paid vacation every year, and they figure out how to make their economy work on that. It's hard in America, it's true. We have huge populations here, and once you have a really big population, it's harder to have those kinds of boutique approaches to things. But we work too hard. We work way too fucking hard, and we are like religiously capitalistic in this country. And I'm not saying that I'm anti-capitalism. There's so much good stuff that comes out of capitalism. There's so many amazing inventions and innovations that come from competition, but there are still certain things that we all agreed upon a long time ago should not be capitalist ventures. School is not capitalist. It's not fair for a poor kid, and we figured out ways to fucking rig the system in this country, which pisses me off. But there's no reason that a poor kid should have a worse education than a rich kid. That's why we have public school. And granted, we fund our public schools in weird ways, so we still end up with poor schools versus rich schools, which fucking sucks, and it shouldn't be that way. But the truth is, public education is free for every student. The police department is free. You know, the fire department is free. We get mail for free for the most part. Like, this is a social endeavor. This is something where we pay our taxes, and we know that the greater good is going to allow it so that people who need it get it. People who don't need it as much don't have to worry about it. We pay into the system. That's what insurance was supposed to be. Did you hear my Texan in that? I always say insurance instead of insurance. But that's what insurance was supposed to be. Our approach to medicine in this country, I think we're doing it the wrong way because we're doing it in a capitalist way. I think once medicine has a public option that's available to people, and once we socialize it to some extent, we allow for ourselves to pool the risk in a specific way that people who are less fortunate still have access to life-saving medicine, which they don't right now. And the truth is, a doctor swore a Hippocratic oath. So if a homeless person wanders into an ER having a heart attack, that doctor is going to treat that person. He's not going to let him fucking die on the steps. He has to treat him, and he will. And who's going to end up footing the bill? We are. We're already assuming the risk with our insurance. Why not assume the risk for everybody by having a public option? I mean, that's what I want to see happen. And I think that we'll start to see if we could change the way that we fundamentally look at healthcare, and we take away that profit motive with healthcare, I think we'll start to see a big shift in the way that we care about the people who are like the less fortunate amongst us, the people who are the sickest.
Yeah, no, I agree. The country's only as strong as its weakest link. I mean, if you get rid of poverty, if you get rid of, or if you help get rid of, fight it and educate people, you're more than likely to have less crime, less drug abuse, less. I mean, you hear like Russell Brand, people talk about how, he's very anti-establishment, right? Lately, and well, he's always been, but I think he's got more attention for it recently. And people are like, oh, but you did drugs and you were, this and that, and he's like, it's funny because he kind of points a finger at society, and he's like, well, I had a shitty bringing up, I had a shitty situation, and I think a lot of people do. Like, you look at like somebody who we like to think that if we all work hard, then we'll all succeed. But it's like, no, it's not the same for everybody. I got lucky.
I know.
I got lucky that I was around decent parents who at least taught me a good working ethic, put me in a decent school, and I had decent friends, and I had got in some good music or some good documentaries that kind of provoke thinking and all this stuff. But there might be somebody who has no positive influences around them that might not have one or either parent in their lives, had uncles and friends, and so where are they going to get the positive experience or the positive motivation? And if they were me, they could be me, and if I was them, I could be them. I mean, we have I work construction, and we're working in a housing authority, and like some of the people who work there and do some of the the carpenters and stuff like that who fix stuff, and they're always like, oh, these fucking people, no, they've been here the whole, it's like, first of all, I know that this guy sits around and does nothing and gets paid, so you might, you're no different than some of these other people. I'm like, but the thing is that you're complaining, but I'm like, you have to realize that like there a lot of these sometimes we see kids roam around around. We're doing this big housing authority project, and we saw just little kids, cute little kids come around, talk to us, and we like, we would talk to them, and they're like just the cutest little, friendly kids. And you're like, this kid he's like just a ball of potential, but that
it's also a ticking time bomb. Exactly. Because that it's just being shaped and molded in the culture and in the abject poverty and in the, where there's no fucking options, there's no chance for advancement, where historically their dad is more likely to be in prison. I mean, 1 in 4 black men in this country go to prison. What the fuck is that? And that's, it has everything to do with the way that our laws are disproportionately targeting.
Well, they say, you look at crack and cocaine, like they're same drug, and yet the sentence is higher for crack. You think that's
8 times higher? It's insane.
It's not a coincidence. Yeah.
And just the fact that our prisons are full of nonviolent drug offenders, which is a whole, that's a whole other problem. But I mean, think about it. Think about if we had free clinics that you could walk into in every neighborhood. If you were like, I need a checkup. If you're a woman and you're like, I should get a pap smear because it's been a year. If you're living on the street and you're like, I've had this weird itch for a while, or I've had this weird pain in my leg, and you can walk into that clinic and you can get a checkup, and maybe you have an infection and you need to take a medication, or maybe the issue is that there's something going on with your heart, or there's something going on with your lungs, and you catch it early, or you figure out a way to have preventive care so that a $5 medication or just some good advice actually prevents you from getting a $50,000 debilitating disease that requires surgery later down the line. It's just, they always say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and it's fucking true. And in this country, we incentivize healthcare in such a way that the more expensive the treatment, the more these people are going to make money. And that's a real problem. We shouldn't be having to do expensive treatments unless somebody is in a life-threatening situation. And nobody should find themselves in a life-threatening situation because they couldn't get access to a low-level drug that should have been free because it's off patent. Like, it's just crazy. It's just crazy how many people don't have access to healthcare in this country. We'd be in a totally different situation if, like you said, the weakest among us were still healthy and happy. Think about if you had enough food in your belly and you were healthy, how much more likely you're going to be able to get a decent job, how much more likely you're going to be able to thrive in school and maybe get out of a shit situation that you were born into. It's almost impossible to do if you're not even eating enough food to get through the day to be able to pay attention. And if you're dealing with low level kind of illness, like waterborne illness or like low level infections, and you don't even know about it, you're just sick all the time. You're sick and you're hungry all the time. How are you ever going to thrive?
Yeah, and I think that all that's important, and your even quality of food. I mean, you look at usually you see fat kids 100% of the time. You're gonna see fat parents. They adopt their diets. It always ends up happening, and it's just like, so like you said, you're not and when you're not getting nutrition, there's so many vitamins and things that you need in with your food, and that helps you think, helps you motivate you. I mean, gives you energy. I mean, having a good diet and nutrition is sometimes having a bad diet is a lack of energy. It's one of the sources.
Oh, completely.
Yeah,
and having a good diet and nutrition is like the number one way to not have to take meds. You know what I mean? It's the number one way to not get the kind of sicknesses. It's a diet, nutrition, sleep. It's like diet, nutrition, sleep, and activity levels, exercise. And we have this epidemic in this country where like we are fat but starving, which is a really sad situation. You have kids who are eating so many calories that have no nutritive value, that they have all of these diseases. They're struggling because they're not getting enough vitamin A, they're not getting enough vitamin C, they're not getting enough vitamin D, yet they're eating foods that are so calorically dense but have no nutritional value. So they're fat, but they're really unhealthy. Like, yeah, you look at Victorian England, when people were fat, they were actually kind of healthy. It was like, oh, they had money, they got to eat good shit, like, ooh,
yeah.
Look at him, he's fat, he got duck last night for dinner. But people aren't eating duck. That's not why we're fat in this country, because we're not eating duck and Brussels sprouts. It's because we're eating Big Macs.
Well, quality,
just like,
quality of calories is it's something that people don't talk about enough. Like, I think people are always like, oh, what's your calorie intake? What's this? And I'm like,
calories in, calories out.
Yeah,
like that. It's that
not
easy.
Yeah,
it's not that easy.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you're trying to lose weight and you're eating decent food, yeah, then that's important. But like, there's a lot of people who might be, even the few calories they are taking in, it's just bad calories. Where are your calories? Are they coming from good proteins and foods that our body naturally has throughout history recognized, like fruits and veggies, and getting it close to its source and all that stuff. So I think that's a huge issue. I think that it would prevent a lot of like you said, a lot of medical issues that people won't end up going to the doctor and trying to get a pill for.
Yeah, I agree.
So
I agree.
So science, okay, let's 50 obviously science now is just, it seems like every day I'm seeing a new feed about some new discovery or some something new, and obviously it's we're learning in a high rate right now. Do you think I remember the quote, I heard the quote once, like, science is a graveyard of good ideas. Do you think like 50 years from now or 100 years from now we're going to look at things and we're going to be like, holy shit, we didn't understand the earth at all? Like, do you think that as things develop, in the future we're going to look back at what we think we understand today, and or is that just one of those downloading consciousness type of crazy ideas?
No, I think that will happen to some extent, but not to the extent that some people think of it, because people like to think that there's like some sort of a linear change, but it's really more exponential. So the dark ages that we left behind, we've gained so much knowledge, and our eyes are so much more open than they ever were in the past. I don't think comparing the dark ages to now and then taking that 500 years, let's say, and saying in 500 years we're going to be that much more in the future is an appropriate way to look at it, because it's been an exponential climb. I do think that there are things, my podcast that came out on Monday, I interviewed Dr. Catherine Fries, and she's a theoretical astrophysicist. She studies dark matter and dark energy. 95% of the known universe is shit we can't measure, and we can't directly measure or see. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah,
like,
I listened to it.
We have solid evidence for dark matter. We don't have a lot of solid evidence. Well, we have semi-solid evidence for dark matter. We don't have like really any evidence for dark energy, but we know that there's this thing that we're trying to describe that exists out there. So yeah, I think there are going to be massive scientific revolutions as we start to get the building blocks of what these things are that are out there that are intangible. Yes, maybe in 100 years, we're going to be like, how the fuck did we not realize? Or, oh my gosh, my perspective has shifted so much. But I don't think that we're going to be like, oh, I can't believe we thought bacteria caused disease. That's a crazy, like, of course, there are certain things that we've learned now that just are true. So we'll be building on that information for sure. But I don't think scientific revolutions don't happen the way that I think that some kind of anti-science alarmists look at them to happen. Like, well, we had a complete overhaul from what we knew before, so that's just going to happen again. It's like, no, as science is a collective body of knowledge that we're constantly adding to. It's actually very rare if you look through history. We can only point to a real handful of things where we went, oh my God, our perspective really changed. Like, we're not the center of the universe. That was a huge shift that came from technology that allowed us to see things that are beyond our borders. The idea of like ether or ectoplasm, those were really just space fillers for concepts, kind of like dark matter is. There were space fillers for concepts that we couldn't yet measure because we didn't have the tools available. But we haven't had some massive shift in like the germ theory of disease. We haven't had some massive shift in the way that we understand the cardiovascular system to work. We've added to our knowledge. We've started to understand, for example, in disease process, that our own bodies are so important for us understanding disease, that are inflammatory factors, that all of these little proteins and factors that we create when we have an injury or when we have an illness actually make us feel worse. And if we can understand how to control inflammation, and if we can understand how to control all these secondary events that happen when we get sick, that we can actually get better quicker. That's kind of a huge revolution, but it doesn't undermine what we knew before. It just adds to it. And I think that that's an important thing to keep in mind. Yeah,
I heard recently that they're saying there's kids that are born, this year that quite possibly could live till 200. Do you think is that something you think?
I think that's possible. I like that you said till 200 and not forever. You know what I mean?
Well, forever sounds awful. It
does sound awful. I don't even know. I don't want to live to 200 if I seem like I'm 200 years old, though. Like, I would only want to live to 200 if I was like a sprightly, like 70-year-old at 200, you know? So if we really were able to extend life, and yes, I think that we live longer now. We live to like 70, 80, 90, 100. It's crazy. And so, yeah, I do think that we are going to see that kind of incremental change. There are kids that are being born right now, when they go to school, think about this. They're going to be learning alongside reading and writing, the basic core kind of things that you learn for literacy, how to count, how to say your ABCs, how to name shapes and colors. They're going to be learning basic coding. Coding is going to be taught as like a fundamental language that's just as important as basic reading and writing skills. Think about how illiterate we're going to feel when we're old. Like, it's one thing when grandma's like, I don't know how to use the iPhone. Can you imagine when we're like, I don't know how to use any of these machines because I can't speak the language that they were written in? Yeah, that's going to be something crazy that we face. We're going to be ridiculous as old people, and the youth that's coming up right now is going to be like so embarrassed by us. So yes, I do think that we're seeing these absolutely revolutionary changes. I think we are going to be living longer. I think we're going to see more machine learning, artificial intelligence. We're going to see specialized genetic medicine, so that medicine is more targeted to our own personal physiology and our own chromosomes, and less kind of generic, like if this works for him, it should probably work for you. So there's going to be huge changes. It's going to be awesome to see it happening. It sucks that we're not going to get to feel the brunt of a lot of it, but we'll get to see it happening to our kids and our kids' kids, and I think that's cool. That's cool enough right there.
Yeah, I think the cool thing about our generation is that we got to, like, I guess, grow and deal with like life experiences and create friends and make friends and deal with like social situations without social network. And then now we got to enjoy it. We're like, I feel like there's going to be some, I don't know, backlash, but it's like we're all these kids now that are growing up with social network, I feel like they're a part of an experiment that we don't know what the outcome is yet. It's like we don't know what it's like before we got bullied in school, you could just come home and you're away from it. Now you can't ever get away from it. Now, if you want to break up with your girlfriend, you don't ride your bike to her house. Now you can just write her a Facebook message and block her, and it's just like, so it's one of those things,
It's just like anything else. I mean, you were talking about how, your family, your grandparents grew up on a farm and they had a simple life and they ate healthier and they lived cleaner. And they probably have the same kind of approach of like, who needs the computer? I don't need it. I got along fine without it. Or maybe they use it for word processing, answering a couple emails, but it didn't unlock something in them like it did in us. I think we'll have the same kind of view. Like with social media, we're like, it's fun. It's something we got to understand. It's something, but we didn't grow up only having that. Same thing we grew up pretty much only having computers, but not having the internet. I think young people, when they get to be our age, are going to be like, life would be horrible without computers. I don't want to know what that's like. That sounds boring and it sounds awful. But those of us who had our toes in both cultures and both societies might say, I really appreciate the simplicity and the health and the insight and the perspective that I had before. But I also appreciate some of the amazing things that came with it. I don't think either camp is correct. I think it's just going to be different, and it's going to continue to be different. I think you can say some things are progressive, some things are regressive. Hopefully we're moving towards progress. But there are things that we will have perspectives about and insights about that kids who were born this year will never have had the opportunity to know or understand. Maybe all that really is a great nostalgic thing that makes us feel good. Maybe it's more than that, but I don't think that these kids are going to be worse off for having the tools that they have. And honestly, I don't think they're going to know any different.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think the one good thing about the younger generation is, and I'm seeing it a lot talking to a lot of my older friends that have kids and stuff that are going to college and are looking for their first jobs out of college. And the one thing I keep hearing a lot is that their kids are less concerned about the raise that they're going to get or how much money they're going to make, and they're more concerned about time off and stuff like that. And I'm like, that is fucking awesome, because like
it's very cool.
Yeah, I think it's awesome that people are starting to find happiness in other things, like I always say, like, you can make more money, you can't make more time. It's I was talking to the amazing Jonathan. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a comedian. Yeah. I had him on a couple of shows ago, and I was telling him about this movie with Justin Timberlake about how basically there's a clock on your wrist. It's called In Time, and there's a clock on your wrist that basically your life is ticking backwards, and you can look down at it. And it's just one of those things where I'm like, and he actually has a heart condition, and he knows that he doesn't have many years left and he's dying, and that's why he kind of retired or whatever. And I was talking to him, and he he was obviously that it puts your whole life in perspective, and talking to somebody like that, and we were talking about how if everybody had that on their wrist and they could see their time ticking backwards and running out, how different we would live our lives. It just
completely.
So I think it's awesome that kids are finally looking at, like, it's important to enjoy life and spend time with your friends and stuff like that. And because that's the one thing about social network and computers and stuff like that. It's definitely awesome because I was a fucking special ed in high school, and then I've had 2 doctors on my show. I'm like, it's like, and people who've done TED Talks and PhD. It's like it's crazy to me. It's just like most people probably. I've actually the first time I've said I was in special ed, but it's one of those things where anybody out there who was in special ed, it doesn't dictate. It doesn't make you an idiot. You have, and a lot of it is the fact that we do have this technology where it's like if I am intrigued with a subject, I can look it up myself. I almost have the same access to information as somebody who goes to a really good college or whatnot. So it's just, I remember the first time I saw Michael Sandel. He's a philosophy professor at Harvard, and he had his whole course, whole semester online, and it was awesome. I'm like, holy shit! I'm like taking philosophy online for free, and it was just it was awesome. And I think that it's cool that, and like you said, it's not right that certain kids who can't afford college can get a better education and other kids can't. And even though we like to act like everybody, it's a playing field, it's a level playing field, it really isn't. And I think that everybody,
not at all. Yeah.
So I just think that, so in some cases, technology is a great thing, and I think it does give us the ability to, if you're research anything you want, and if somebody listens to your show and then you blow them away with some science talk. Sometimes I listen and I'm like, it's like a whole nother language, and I'm just like, dude, I'm gonna have to Google some of this shit because I don't know what you're talking. But it's good because I have the ability to do that. So it's and that just becomes just a journey to something else and then something else. So but it does seem like sometimes you can take in too much. You ever research and you like take in so much information that after you're done, you're like, dude, I didn't consume any of that.
That does happen. Yeah. That does happen. But I think you're right. I think we do need to, we can't forget about the digital divide. We can't forget that there are still people who don't have access to the internet. There's still plenty of people who don't have smartphones and who don't have computers and who aren't able to do the things that we're talking about doing. But the digital divide is ever shrinking, and I think that in some ways the internet is a great leveler. Yes, the playing field is not level. I don't think it's going to be level because of the way that we govern in this country and because of the systemic historical racism and some of the problems that we've not been able to move past. But at least we do have the internet, and at least we're starting to see that more and more people are getting internet access because it brings the world together in a way that nothing else ever has before. It's making the world smaller. It's making it so that, like you said, if you want to consume information, you have it at your fingertips. You can do Khan Academy for free. You can watch as many TED Talks. You can watch as many YouTube tutorials. You can find access to incredible educational tools at whatever level you're starting from. And you don't have to pay any money to do any of those things besides your basic internet subscription. And hopefully we're getting to a point where more and more people can go to the library, or they can get access in their public schools, even if they can't afford to have internet at home. If it's not wired, if they don't have a smartphone, they still can consume that. The way that a public library used to provide books, which, yes, people can still check out books, and I think it's very important to read. I read constantly. But to also be able to log on and do whatever you want to do online, it just opens up a world of possibilities that makes me really excited.
Yeah, I definitely. But I definitely took up a lot of your time. I think time flew by. But thank you so much for being with me. I really appreciate it. It was awesome to talk about everything. And I think what you're doing is awesome. It's awesome because a lot of podcasts, not that every comedian is the same or every MMA podcast is the same or whatever, but yours does stick out because it is on a subject that there isn't a lot of podcasts on, on science. And the cool thing is that I love how you don't stray away from like debate, and I think that there is a difference between an argument and a debate. I think that I enjoy debating. I enjoy, because I think you can take something from it. I think, I've heard you and Joe Rogan, debate about certain issues, and those make for the most intriguing shows, because you're getting two perspectives that are really well thought out, and you can kind of, and that's what molds your own perspective. You take something that makes sense to you. Intelligence isn't based on just consuming, a fact and then saying it, but it's picking what information makes the most sense, and then helping mold your own. So I think it's awesome that you are outspoken. You're not, you don't stray away from a debate. I think it's a bad thing that we tell people, stay away from conversations about politics or whatever, or religion.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm like, dude,
we should be talking about it all the time.
Yeah, I'm like, we can argue about like Red Sox and Yankees or Patriots and Giants all day, and we can be throwing shit, getting in bar fights, but it's like, but stay away from religion and politics. It's like, I don't get it. Like, it's almost like it's only in politicians' favor that people are saying, hey, I pick this team, you pick that team, and let's not talk about it and try to agree. Because I think a lot of times if we say, hey, do we agree on this, we agree on that, there is a lot of topics that people agree on. It's like a lot of people have sometimes I say, I agree with a lot of libertarian views, and I'm not a libertarian, but there's a lot of views I agree with, and people are like, oh, they're crazy, and I'm like, well, do you believe in this? Do you believe? And I'm like, does this make sense? And they're like, yeah, that makes sense. I'm like, that's a libertarian view. It's like, so, or like socialist, we use terms and we scare people off, like, oh, you're a socialist. Well, fucking, our school system is kind of a socialist idea. Our mail system is kind of a socialist. I mean, I think people say, we've done a great job of saying this is a bad word, this is a good word. Being a liberal is a bad thing. Being a tree hugger is a bad thing, and which it's pretty insane. It's like, wait, I care about the environment. It's like, don't get me wrong. There's extremists in every genre of people, but I think that we pick these teams, and we don't. I think it's important to have these conversations and hear people have a friendly debate. And I think you can always, if it's a friendly debate, and we're not, because some people are just really good at debating, and they're not really, somebody can win a debate without making any real good points, and I think that when you're debating and you're just looking at the points, and when somebody makes a point, you say, hey, that makes sense, but this is what I think you can take a lot from that, and you grow and you learn. So I think it's awesome that you do that and you don't stray away from it. And I'm like you, I'm one of those people that say, hey, people tell you don't talk about politics, but don't my girlfriend's always worried, because anytime somebody says something that I don't agree with, she just looks at me and she's like stay shut, and I'm just, but I can't help it. It's like, to me, it's like I'm like letting ridiculous ideas just blossom, and believe that what they're saying makes sense. And I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense, and I'm not gonna fight with you, but I'm gonna tell you my 2 cents, and hopefully we can be adults about it. So I think that's an important important point to kind of highlight.
Definitely, I'm right there with you.
Hey, thanks again, and we'll be listening to your podcast. I'll put links in the show description to her show. Check out her website, Cara Santa Maria. Maria, I should say the Portuguese way, because in Portuguese culture, there's like a generation where everybody was a Maria. So it was just
for sure, yeah.
Very
my last name's Italian, but I'm also half Puerto Rican. It's like 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. I have such a Latin name, Santa Maria.
And it's fun to say, so why not?
Yeah.
And it's funny because you're an atheist, but it's kind of a...
I know, but it's like such a religious name for sure.
But yeah, definitely check out her podcast. Her website has tons of just videos and shows she's been on and appearances and all that stuff, so check that out. And it's Talk Nerdy, and like I said, I'll put the links up. And thanks again. I really appreciate you being with us today, and I'll stay updated with your work and keep looking out for fighting that good fight, I guess.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, thanks. Take care.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.
I believe in the ripple effect.